Now, Envision does not replace other kinds of planning, but it gives the other kinds of planning context. And this is based on the questions we ask. Who are we as a culture? Every community needs to ask that. Because times have changed. When I was a kid in the 40s and 50s, we didn't have computers. Never even thought of anything like that. We had Buck Rogers, for heaven's sakes. In the comic books, that was as wild as we got. And I wrote my first book on a typewriter with 3 carbon copies. And then I graduated having a secretary, and she used a typewriter with 3 carbon copies. And I felt terrible anytime I edited what I wrote because she had to retype it all. She put in errors which I didn't have in there to begin with. And one of them I framed for her because I was writing about snowshoe hares and porcupines and wind-thrown timber, and she ended up with sets of wind-thrown crisscross porcupines. So I framed it for her, gave her a hug and kiss, and hung it on her wall. What we need to do is ask, who are we today? Before you start the visioning process. This has come home to me more than once working with Indigenous people. And working with the Fort Liard Band in the Northwest Territories above British Columbia. I got them together one night before we started, got the council together, and I said, with a great deal of respect, I have to ask you a very difficult question. Who are you today? And they couldn't answer it. Because we don't think about that. So I said, you're not your ancestral selves because that was taken from you. But you're not Anglo either because you choose not to be. So my question is, what of your ancestral ways are so important to you, you want to carry them forward? And what of the white ways are you willing to accept? And we wrote them down. That's okay, now how do we put these together? Because this is who you are today. And it defines your road into the future. Now this wasn't my brilliant brainstorm. This came from Sitting Bull at the close of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. When the warriors were starting to celebrate that they beat the military. And Sitting Bull told them not to. He said the white man will never go away. We must take of our ancient ways what we need to keep and take of the white ways what we can accept because that's your road into the future. A brilliant statement, and it's as valid today because when the Fort Liard Band had defined who they were today, then I could ask them, what legacy do you want to leave your children? But it wasn't a legacy based on ancient values because they couldn't do that. And they certainly weren't Anglo because they didn't want to be. But they were sort of drifting that way and trying to pull something with them which they didn't understand. But now they define themselves. Now they stopped being victims of the past and they became a presence in the present that could leave an unconditional gift to their children in the future. And every community needs to redefine who it is periodically so that when they create a cause, the effect is something the kids can live with. Because we have to remember that our decisions become the children's consequences and we give them no voice in the process. Another way of doing something like this, of helping people understand the change, in Whitethorn, California, I had them convene a panel. I've done this more than once, of grandparents, parents, and grandkids. To sit up in front of the audience and ask them, what was the community like when you, the grandparents, were kids, and what did you want? And then ask the parents. And see how it changed, and see if any of those desires were fulfilled. And then ask the kids, what do you want? Your parents would love to have you stay in the community. What would you want it to be like? What would it take to keep you here? And you'd be amazed at what the kids say. In Whitethorn, one of the kids very boldly got up and said, I want you to stop lying to the parent. The reason was growing marijuana was the cash crop. And the parents were teaching the children to be honest, but they had to lie to keep their parents out of jail because they couldn't admit that marijuana was the cash crop. So what the kids were saying was, we want honesty in the community. You're giving us a mixed message. You could hear a pin drop in the audience because that applied to everybody. But this helps the people see the vision through the eyes of the child because their whole future's in front of them. We've lived part of our life. They're just beginning theirs. What do they want? A good question to ask of the community is, what would it take to make a child happy? If you have a happy child in a community, you have a functional community. In the South Seas, the saying is, it takes a village to raise a child. But now think about that statement, it's very important. It takes a village to raise a child. What is left unsaid is, the child therefore becomes the integrator of the village. The child integrates all of the activities because they're all built around raising the child. So including children is critically important. In Whitethorn, I had not just a panel, I had kids in the audience. And then I broke them out so that they would have breakout sessions. There were too many people there. I mean, the place was jammed. So that they would have groups that come up with some kind of a vision statement. The kids were largely responsible for what was written down. And to my absolute delight, when they shared the vision statements, the adults told the children to make the presentations. I held a chart. Then they got together to consolidate the vision. The children were part of that. And in the end, the kids wrote the vision. I helped with a long vision process in a town called Lakeview. They needed congressional approval to do what they wanted to do on the land. I went through, because it had to do with national forests, I went through how forests function with slides. I had them for 3 days. We looked at slides, we discussed the science of forestry, how the systems function. When I say forestry, I mean how forests function. Then we went out in the field and looked at them. Spent a day examining how they function so that what I had said became concrete. It was no longer abstract. They could smell it, taste it, get their hands dirty. And the third day, we struggled with a vision. There were 50 people there, including conservation groups, and nobody could write a vision that was acceptable. Until a young woman, a junior in high school, read her vision statement. It was instantly adopted by the community. There have been a lot of disbelievers in the process until that child got up and read her statement and brought tears to the eyes of the community. I went back 6 months later to consummate, to bring the thing to closure, because they needed to think about it. It was serious. They had to get congressional approval. They spent 2 hours trying to niggle and nitpick that child's vision statement, and in the end left it exactly as she had written it. And they got congressional approval. If it hadn't been for that young woman, they wouldn't have a vision because they couldn't agree on it. Their politics got in the way. They spoke from here. She spoke from here. Emotions, feelings, heart, that's what the vision is about. This is your time to speak about values. You won't have them again. This is the thing you must do.